There's a passage that I read that says, when we say no, never, we close our minds off against the grace of God. So if no means we're closing ourselves off against the grace of God, how do we open ourselves up to grace? Hi, everybody. Kevin Barheit here. Thanks for tuning in. I made a video last week and talked about grace, and a good friend of mine, BK, hey BK, asked me to expound on grace a bit, and I don't think I can do it justice, but I can do it justice from my own experience, strength, and hope. I've been working a 12-step program for over 34 years now, and there's a local clubhouse for one of the 12-step groups here in Schenectady. And as you leave the building, there's a sign above that says, "But for the grace of God." And as I walk out a door like that in a 12-step room, I can really very easily see the grace of God in my life. I can see the grace of my higher power, and I can see the grace of where I came from, how hard it was, how much of a struggle it was, and how different my life is now. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of struggles, there's a lot of reasons to feel sorry for myself. But what I really needed was to find that compassion for myself, that self-empathy. And when I start to think about it now, I start to understand that in order to find that self-compassion, that self-empathy for myself, I had to learn to have it for other people, didn't I? I had to learn to have compassion for others, patience, forbearance, tolerance, and then I could start to even treat myself with that kind of compassion. And I think the same thing rings true for grace in my life. When I was out there drinking and drugging and struggling, and even before that, when there was abuse happening in my life and I was struggling with being abused, and even before that, when I was abandoned and I was given up for adoption and I had to deal with the abandonment feelings in my life. All those things really broke me in two. They made me feel unworthy. Unworthy of my own self, unworthy of good people in my life, and certainly unworthy of grace. Unworthy of the love of God. Unworthy of having a higher power in my life that could care for me or find even any value or worth in me. But even I, someone who felt so broken and so used and so abandoned and so discarded, even I had to admit that someone like myself who was finding recovery, who was finding a place in the 12-step rooms, who was finding a place in society, and was finding a sense of relief from those struggles, even I had to admit that there was some value that was placed on me, and I had to understand that part of that had to be grace. Part of that had to be that no matter how unworthy I felt I was worthy. No matter how undeserving I felt that I was deserving. And somewhere as I traveled through my recovery, that became the definition for me of grace. Knowing that no matter how unworthy I felt, I was worthy. No matter how broken and discarded that I felt, I had value. I was cared for, and I was loved. And as I went from someone who was all about myself, there go I, to someone who recognized that there was grace, I started to understand that I could see that grace. I could sense that grace. Sometimes I understood it as maybe the kindness of a person towards me. Sometimes I understood it as my sponsor caring for me, letting me cry on his shoulder. Many times I understood it as those quiet moments in prayer and meditation when I understood and felt that there was a higher power in my life, even though I never expected that to happen. A lot of times it was just the smile of my child. It was the laugh of my wife. It was the laughter of our whole family sitting around the dinner table roaring. I knew those were all moments of grace. And then I looked deeper. And then I looked in those quiet moments. And I kind of recognized that grace was something that I could identify, but it was even more something that I could sense. It was like the flicker of a candle. I knew it was there, but if I looked at it, it moved so quickly I couldn't grab it. That flickering flame was always there. Those pieces of grace in my life, they became too numerous to even count. They were moments that were morning, noon, and night. And that to me is that understanding that grace isn't something that comes and goes. It's not something that I can identify as a mile marker, a place, a time, or even a happening. It's always. It's a gift that's been given. It's freely given. Something that I have to accept, take into my life, take into my heart. And even as I started to see that transformation in my life, from there go I, that self-centeredness, to this understanding of grace, having always been there before, being there now, and that flickering grace would always be there for me. I had to realize that there was more to it than just the flickering grace. I came to understand that the light of grace in my life was not the objective that I was heading towards. The light of grace in my life was calling me towards the candle, toward my higher power, toward the source of the flickering grace. And while I'd be glad to talk about my own understanding of my higher power with anyone, anytime, anywhere, it's not the important thing to me. The important thing for me to remember is that I am not my own higher power. And the grace that's been given to me in my life is not the grace that I gave myself. It came from my higher power and is guiding me to my higher power. And to understand there, but for the grace of God, go I have to understand that the grace that's so freely given to me is only mine to receive if I'm willing to give that grace to others. And grace can be as simple, and is as simple, as loving and accepting others, no matter what they've done, no matter how they've behaved, no matter how much they've gone through their own hurts and their own despair in their life. Loving and accepting others the way I know my higher power love and accepts me. And as we say, there, but for the grace of God, go I. There's that big G word. There's actually 3 G words, aren't there, though? There's the obvious one, God. We talk about God. That can be really something that people struggle with. And I'm telling you, that's my candle. That's between me and my higher power. I can tell you about the grace in my life, but I can only tell you that that grace is pointing me toward my higher power. The important thing isn't for me to tell you, this is my God of my understanding. The important thing is that I have a God of my own understanding. The big G word isn't grace. The big G word for me isn't God. The big G word is go. There, but for the grace of God, go I. My higher power, through the grace that I've been given, is telling me, don't just sit with this grace that you've been given. Go. Don't just understand that you have been given so much grace and be grateful for that. Go and give it to others. Go and share it with the people around you. Go and make a video tonight. Go and share these thoughts with others. Don't try to judge it. Don't try to figure out if you're saying the right thing or not. Don't try to be clear or perfect or sure. Just go. Trust that the grace that I have in my life and the relationship that I have with my higher power is enough. It's enough. And as I go out from here, as I walk out of that 12-step room where the sign says, but for the grace of God, I've got to remember it's my responsibility to go and carry that grace and be full of grace and to share that grace with others. And I can only live in grace when I have the full confidence that I have the ability to give others grace. That instead of saying no, I can say go. But when I go, it's not about me. It's about grace. And it's about my higher power. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Thanks for taking the time today. I hope this finds you well. Please make sure to like and share this video. Please comment below and subscribe if you haven't. Hope to see you next week. Take care.